Aren't these two little fellows funny? Today I want to tell you something about the sarcastic fringehead, because this small marine creature may appear harmless at first glance. Yet every subtle change in the water reveals whether another animal is approaching or whether the current carries something unusual, allowing him to understand early whether he must defend himself or whether the situation remains calm. In the darker parts of his territory, the sarcastic fringehead reacts even to the faintest pressure waves, because his sensitive lateral line detects vibrations that remain invisible to other animals, enabling him to know exactly what moves around him. Among plants, stones, and tight crevices, he uses the structure of the water to orient himself, because currents and countercurrents reveal where other animals are hiding, allowing him to succeed even in complex environments. When the current suddenly becomes stronger, he reacts immediately, because he does not fight the water but uses its force, maintaining maximum stability with minimal FO. In calmer zones, he detects even the smallest movements of prey, because the water's surface transmits every change, making his attacks efficient and surprise. Under changing light conditions, he uses shifting shadows for camouflage, because even weak brightness alters the perception of his prey, making his attacks more precise and harder to predict. During the rainy season, when the water becomes murkier and new scents appear, he relies more on pressure wave perception, because sight plays almost no role, allowing him to remain successful even under difficult conditions. In the end, you realize that the sarcastic fringehead does not simply see his environment, but feels, reads, and interprets it, making him one of the most fascinating inhabitants of his habitat. In the narrow crevices of his rocky territory, the sarcastic fringehead displays a level of alertness far beyond what one would expect from such a small marine creature, because every subtle change in the water reveals whether another animal is approaching or whether the current carries something unusual, allowing him to understand early whether he must defend himself or whether the situation remains harmless enough for him to stay hidden. Among the sharp stones that form his home, he reacts even to the faintest pressure waves, because his sensitive lateral line detects vibrations that remain invisible to other animals, enabling him to know exactly what moves around him even without light, and whether an intruder is trying to approach unnoticed. When another animal comes too close, he opens his colorful mouth into an impressive, almost circular display, because the sudden enlargement of his body not only serves intimidation, but also shows how perfectly his behavior is adapted to life in tight territories, allowing him to drive away even larger animals that underestimate his strength. During calmer moments, he remains motionless inside his shelter, because the water's surface transmits every subtle change, allowing him to detect movements from greater distances and react instantly when an opportunity appears or danger. Under changing light conditions, he uses shifting shadows for camouflage, because even weak brightness alters the perception of other animals, making his reactions more precise and harder to predict, and turning the surrounding environment into a tool he uses with remarkable skill. When the current becomes stronger, he adjusts his movements immediately, because he does not fight the water but uses its force, maintaining maximum control with minimal effort, and showing how perfectly his body is adapted to conditions that often challenge other animals. During the rainy season, when the water becomes murkier and new scents appear, he relies more on pressure wave perception, because sight plays almost no role, allowing him to remain successful even under difficult conditions, and showing full strength of his senses that make him an extraordinary inhabitant of his coastal world. In the end, you realize that the sarcastic fringehead does not simply see his environment, but feels, reads, and interprets it, making him one of the most fascinating creatures of the Pacific coast, understood only when you observe his world with respect. The sarcastic fringehead reaches only a modest size of 10 to 15 centimeters, Yet this compact body makes him a master of narrow rock crevices, because his flexible shape allows him to occupy territories that larger animals cannot enter, giving him secure hiding places even in densely populated coastal regions. During the mating season, he displays behavior far more intense than that of many other bottom-dwelling fish, because the males defend their shelters with a determination that intimidates even much larger animals, allowing females to recognize which partner is strong enough to protect the offspring and which shelter offers the best conditions for the brood. When a female is ready to lay her egg, she approaches the male's shelter cautiously, because the choice of partner determines the survival of the brood, allowing her to observe exactly how attentive and stable the future guardian reacts to movements in the water, and whether he can reliably keep intruders awa. Why? After the eggs are laid, the male takes full responsibility for brood care, because he remains inside the shelter and guards the eggs with an intensity remarkable for such a small creature, allowing him to detect every pressure wave, every shadow, and every change in the water, and react instantly when a potential predator approaches. Yes, the eggs adhere firmly to the inner walls of the shelter, because their sticky structure prevents them from being carried away by currents, allowing the male to fan fresh water over them regularly to supply enough oxygen and support the development of the larvae, which grow particularly quickly in this protected environment. And when the larvae hatch, they remain inside the shelter at first, because their delicate bodies are not yet ready for the strong coastal currents, allowing the male to continue monitoring every movement, and release the young only when they are strong enough to swim independently and hide in the crowd. Ices. In the first days after leaving the shelter, the young rely heavily on pressure wave perception, because their eyes are not fully developed, allowing them to depend mainly on the structure of the water and learn how to detect danger early and retreat to S. Apathy. In the end, the brood care of the sarcastic fringehead shows how much energy and attention such a small creature can invest, because his combination of territorial behavior, protective instinct, and precise perception makes him one of the most fascinating brood guardians of the Pacific coast, understood only when you observe his world with respect. In the wide and branching coastal regions where the sarcastic fringehead lives, he shows an adaptability far beyond what one would expect from such a small creature, because his ability to survive inside narrow rock crevices allows him to withstand strong currents, shifting temperatures, and the presence of larger predators, making him one of the most resilient inhabitants of this environment. When the seasons change and the currents bring new nutrients to the coast, he uses these conditions to increase his energy, because the rising activity of small prey animals offers him more opportunities to hunt, allowing him to build reserves and prepare for the intense phases of his life in which territorial defense and brood care demand great strength. In moments when other animals retreat, the sarcastic fringehead remains alert and watchful, because every pressure wave in the water reveals whether another creature is approaching or whether the environment is shifting, allowing him to react early and maintain control over his territory even during turbulent periods. When larger animals attempt to enter his shelter, he displays his impressive mouth at full size, because his colorful circular structure serves not only intimidation but also clear communication, allowing him to show that this place belongs to him and that any intruder must expect determined defend. During calmer phases, when the coastline is less active, he uses the opportunity to maintain his shelter, because small deposits, plant fragments, and sand can alter its structure, allowing him to clear the interior with delicate movements and ensure that the brood later has enough space and protect. When night falls and visibility decreases, he relies entirely on pressure wave perception, because his eyes are not designed to see in complete darkness, allowing him to detect the movements of other animals solely through the structure of the water and navigate safely through the coastal Shah. Douse. In rare moments when the current becomes particularly strong, he remains deep inside his shelter, because although his body is resilient, the force of the water can still be dangerous, allowing him to wait patiently until conditions calm and he can safely hunt and defend his territory. Again, in the end, you realize that the sarcastic fringehead is not only an unusual coastal inhabitant, but a creature that reads its environment with a precision that makes it one of the most fascinating animals of the Pacific coast. understood only when you observe his world with respect and notice the fine details of high S-Life. If you enjoyed this film and would like to follow more exciting ocean stories, I would be delighted if you subscribe and leave a like so we can continue exploring this fascinating underwater world together.